a boy was born in Saguenay, Quebec, Canada. He was raised in Thetford Mines, a small city in south-central Quebec that had been used as the hub for one of the largest asbestos mining operations in the world. Despite his teachers praising his intelligence, the boy dropped out of school at age 13 in favor of studying the Old Testament, and more specifically, the biblical end of days. His obsession with religion and the apocalypse grew further, slithering into his adulthood. Years of fanatic self-education corrupted his view of the world, believing both humanity and the earth to be tainted. In the coming years, he claimed the role of self-appointed leader for a new religious movement that would aim to survive Armageddon. According to himself, he was a prophet. His name? Roch, the founder and leader of the Anthill Kids, one of the most brutal cults to ever disgrace North America. There isn't a whole lot we know about Roch, at least outside of his cult. But what is present is enough to piece together an idea of what kind of person he was. The extent of the abuse he suffered as a child is unknown. Whispers of a violent father are sparsely mentioned, but are not expanded upon, rendering the reliability of such a claim questionable, yet noteworthy nonetheless. With that in mind, the religious exposure has significantly better documentation. Therieux had been raised as a Catholic, up until his beliefs shifted in favor of alternative ideals. He had found a new home, one in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and their teachings. The practice of abstaining from alcohol, tobacco, and processed food was Therieux's first step towards purity in a world that he perceived as corrupt and vile. But the Adventist view on masculinity was of particular interest to Therieux. Men were to be guided by biblical values, act as role models for other men, and, so long as their faith remained, were destined for leadership. Considering Therieux's future, it isn't difficult to imagine why such religious duties encouraged his involvement in the church. But promises of authority were not enough for Therieux. His desires were of totalitarian rule. By the mid-1970s, Therieux had found new utility in the church. He sifted through the ranks, searching for the most malleable believers among the Adventists. Through hushed whispers, he spread his own beliefs of a coming war against divine corruption. Many were uninterested in what he had to say, but those few who were captivated by promises of safety from the coming apocalypse were drawn in and tethered to Therieux. They would follow him into the future without question. He was their self-appointed prophet. Over time, the superiors caught wind of what was going on within their church and reacted accordingly. Therieux was promptly removed to avoid furthering the spread of his new religion. But the vulnerable few had already been located. They were loyal to Therieux and Therieux alone. With his intelligence came charisma, and with it he convinced a band of believers to join him in his mission against impurity, persuading his followers to leave behind their loved ones and homes, as Therieux deemed them corrupt as well. Roch solidified his name as a New Age prophet, a prophet in the eyes of those who worshipped him unconditionally, and a monster to the rest of the world. Like any other cult leader, the good intentions initially presented quickly dissolved, revealing vile ambition and an insatiable lust for power and authority. Having established his cult, composed of 4 men, 9 women, and 4 children, Therieux had laid out the plans which would guide his followers toward their salvation. A roadmap that steered them away from sin and drove them towards unification, fueled by the goal of founding a small community where the curious would be capable of listening to Theryu's prophetic words of wisdom. In order to accomplish this, sacrifices had to be made. Those sacrifices came in the shape of voluntary abandonment. And considering those who trusted Theryu conjointly believed that the world was on the brink of destruction, they had no interest in being left behind for the supposed hellfire to take them. The acolytes not only left their homes, families, and church, but were prohibited from making any contact with anyone outside of the cult. This reclusive requirement became much more invasive as time went on. We'll touch on that later. Establishing a temporary commune in St. Mary, Quebec, a year passed. All was peaceful among the cult. The collective behavior of everyone involved was, all things considered, normal. All except for one, that is. Theryu's irrational obsession had climaxed. While his followers tended to the commune for the sake of their collective survival, Theryu claimed to have been spoken to by God. His delusional visions warned him that, during February of 1979, a mere 2 years, the world would be consumed by death, devastation, and hellfire. The following year, 1978, the cult moved locations. From St. Mary to a mountainside Theryu referred to as Eternal Mountain. This new commune would neighbor that of the nearby community of St. Jacques, a small town approximately 600 kilometers away from St. Mary. Up until this point, the cult had been without a name. During the construction of this new commune, Theryu relaxed and observed as his followers worked tirelessly. He compared them to ants, dedicating themselves to an anthill. And from there, the name was officially coined. But that isn't important. Doomsday came and went. And if you take a look around, you'll see we're still here. Someone's got some explaining to do. Following the unfortunate lack of death and destruction, Theryu had insisted this was a simple misunderstanding of God's word. Theryu claimed that the holy world and our own are not parallel, essentially stating that we do not share the same time zone or calendar, meaning that this date of supposed apocalypse was still yet to come. When exactly that was, Theryu never said. The mysterious nature of an ambiguous date of such a monumental event was enough to retain a level of trust between Theryu and his acolytes. But he knew that there was unease amongst the ranks. His solution in regaining their loyalty? Establish a harem composed of the 9 women who join the cult and impregnate them multiple times over. By the early 80s, Roch Theryu had become the father of over 20 children. Although this may seem like an unhinged course of action, this was only the beginning. Theryu's founding idea to pose as a motivational speaker on behalf of God had begun to fall apart. Considering his previous allegiance with the Adventist Church, it's ironic that Theryu fell victim to alcoholism. As the addiction worsened, so did Theryu's irrational goals and unbridled aggression. In 1981, one of Theryu's sons, age 2, had difficulty urinating. To remedy this, Theryu took on the role of cult surgeon. With his God-given medical expertise, Theryu performed an operation that, with any luck, would allow the boy to urinate once again. As you might imagine, the side effects, bleeding, screaming, and crying, were not ideal. Theryu's assistant, Guy Veer, had beaten the boy in order to silence him. Tragically, the boy had succumbed to his wounds and died shortly after. The cult promptly burned the body in an attempt to conceal any incriminating evidence, but Theriu, clearly having done no wrong, blamed Guy for the child's death. As punishment, Theriu castrated Vir. Thankfully, Vir had managed to escape and report the incident to local authorities, who raided the commune, discovered the ashen remains of the boy, and arrested Theriu along with 8 followers who partook in the torment. They were charged with criminal negligence, causing bodily harm. This was only a glimmer of Theriu's twisted fantasies that would further intensify as time went on, all in the name of God. With Theriu's release from his 18-month prison sentence, the cult made the arduous journey from St. Jacques, Quebec, to Burnt River, Ontario. Here, their final commune was established. In order to support themselves, the cult would craft curios, prepare baked goods, smoke meat, and harvest vegetables, which they then sold on the side of a road nearby. If Theriu's arbitrary quota was not met, those he deemed responsible would be punished by means which we will cover shortly. The residents of Burnt River were fully aware of the cult's presence, and, for now, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. They had no details regarding Theriu's violent history or prison time. As far as the townsfolk were concerned, they were just a group of hippies living in the woods. But behind the scenes, the quality of life among the anthill kids sharply declined. Theriu's restrictive grip on the lives of his acolytes tightened as the weeks passed. His mental faculties became ever more concerning. Cultists were no longer permitted to communicate with each other without Theriu being present. Those who wished to partake in more intimate matters were restricted from doing so unless given permission by their leader. Surprisingly, Theriu managed to convince his followers that his actions were somehow justified. What was most concerning was the fact that nobody questioned him whatsoever. But that isn't to say that Theriu believed all of his followers to be loyal. Punishment. I've mentioned it briefly, yet I haven't elaborated. Theriu had incorporated a multitude of methods that he used to correct the behavior of some and break others. Those he did not trust, he spied on, and claimed that God told him what they did. Of course, this is purely psychological. What Theriu did to those who wished to leave was nothing short of torture. Punishments for the would-be deserters included beatings with either a hammer or belt, suspending them from a ceiling in one of the cabins, plucking individual body hair for extended periods of time, or defecating on their person. As mentioned previously, as Theriu's addiction worsened, so did his cruel tendencies and irrational behavior. It was around this time that Theriu had a delusional epiphany. The beatings and torture were all a means of purification that his followers must undergo before the coming apocalypse. The frequency and brutality steadily increased. He would take multiple women from his harem and make them compete in bed. Gladiatorial contests were orchestrated, where 2 nude cultists would battle for 3-minute intervals for his pleasure. But the full event could last for hours on end. Members were forced to break their own legs with sledgehammers to prove their loyalty. Nude whipping sessions in the freezing cold were used to expel impurity. The forceful removal of digits, and on occasion entire limbs, and of course, no meal of suffering is complete without dessert. Members were forced to consume dead rodents, live insects, and feces excreted by themselves and others. His children, who referred to him as Pappy, were routinely sexually and physically abused. Children would be nailed to trees, while others would lob rocks at them. Some were held over fires and cisterns as means of leverage. forcing their mothers to perform disgusting sexual acts with other members while begging for the child's safety. But even after all of the atrocities, Theryu never took any sort of accountability. Instead, he would wake in the morning, when finally sober, and cry his eyes out, begging God to stop commanding him. In 1985, one of the mothers knew the fate that her child was destined to was that of pain and suffering. As a show of mercy, she left her baby to freeze to death in the frigid Canadian weather. As a stroke of luck following this depressing course of action, locals caught wind of this and alerted Child Protective Services. A police raid ensued, which resulted in 14 children aged between 5 months and 16 years being rescued from the cult. 9 more had been removed from the premises days after their respective births. With each child that was removed from the commune, their mother was given the option to leave with them, as Theryu's past had been extensively researched during this time. Authorities knew that the mothers were not at fault and wanted to give them the chance to raise their children without the presence of a lunatic like Theryu. But despite their chances at freedom, they remained in the company of their messiah. Even with the knowledge of what was occurring, police were unable to arrest Theryu as there was not enough concrete evidence to prosecute him. Frustrated with this conclusion, law enforcement left the scene and allowed the cult to continue their activities. In 1988, one of Theryu's most appalling crimes took place. One of his wives had made simple mention of a stomachache. Once again playing the role of medical professional, Theryu ordered his followers to hold her down on a table. Theryu then punched her in the stomach, inserted a plastic tube in her rectum, and performed an enema using olive oil and molasses. Without any anesthetic or proper medical tools, Theryu cut open her abdomen, and, with his bare hands, ripped out a piece of her intestines. One of the women, Gabrielle Lavallee, stitched the wound shut with a sewing needle and thread. Once sealed, the other women were ordered to insert a tube down the patient's throat and blow into it, for a reason only known to Theryu. Following the operation's success in killing the woman, Theryu removed a rib, which he had kept as a souvenir. Seeing that his patient had succumbed to a common symptom of a stomachache, death, he bored a hole into her skull for his male followers to assist him in completing this new procedure. Having received his medical prowess from God himself, Theryu was well educated in reviving the dead. With the brain now exposed, he, and every other man in the cult, ejaculated into the deceased woman's skull with the intent to bring her back to life. Needless to say, she did not rise from the dead. The body was then buried near the commune the same day. Later, Theryu came to rid Gabrielle Lavallee of her toothache. As treatment, 8 of her teeth were forcibly removed, a hypodermic needle had been broken off in her back, parts of her breast had been removed, her skull had been fractured with the blunt side of an axe, and her genitals underwent blowtorch therapy. Miraculously, she survived the ordeal, but following an escape attempt, Gabrielle had been subjected to additional horror. Using a hunting knife, Theryu pinned Gabrielle's hand to a table and, with a dull cleaver, crudely amputated her right arm. Realizing that she would likely perish if she did not take any action, Gabrielle escaped the commune. Arriving at a hospital, she informed law enforcement of what was happening at the commune. With the provided information, Theryu had been convicted for assault, resulting in the majority of the cult to disband. Upon the discovery of a woman's mutilated corpse, police were able to shut down the cult entirely, and Theryu's sentence graduated from a mere 12 years to life in prison at Dorchester Penitentiary, New Brunswick. And on February 26, 2011, Theryu was found dead near his cell. The 60-year-old convicted murderer, Matthew MacDonald, had stabbed the cult leader to death with a shiv. Having already been serving a life sentence, this made no difference to the man. That piece of shit is down on the range. Here's the knife. I've sliced him up. The story of the Anthill Kids is one without a happy ending. Aside from the well-deserved execution of Roch Theriu, nothing positive came of these heinous events. But there are a few pieces that have come from this grotesque period of obscure history. The film Savage Messiah is a retelling of the events, along with a better account of the legal dilemma. The book, Alliance of the Sheep, is Gabriel's memoir of her time spent in the company of the raving lunatic. The book, The Sons of Moses, written by Roch Sylvain Theriu and Francois Theriu, tells of the hell they experienced at the hands of their father. I encourage you to do your own research if you so desire. The events, although gruesome, are a clear-cut example of what fanaticism and instability can do to a person. With all that said and done, thank you for your time and support, no matter how brief. Have a pleasant day.